My mum said her new husband would take my room. 6 months later, she realised her mistake. When my mum told me her new husband Steve would be moving in and taking my room, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. I was 17, just starting my senior year of high school, and my room was my sanctuary. But no, she was serious. "You're old enough to adapt, Emma," she said with a shrug. "You can move into the basement. It'll be like your own private space." The basement? It was dark, damp, and smelled like mildew. My protests fell on deaf ears. Steve moved in within a week, setting up his home office in my room, and I was banished to the basement. At first, I tried to make the best of it. I strung up fairy lights, brought in a space heater, and spent hours rearranging the furniture to make it feel less like a dungeon. But nothing could mask the dripping pipes or the eerie silence at night. I felt like a guest in my own home. Meanwhile, Steve and my mum acted like everything was perfect. They redecorated my old room, now Steve's study, with bright curtains and a new desk. They didn't even ask if I wanted to keep anything from it. Months passed, and my resentment grew. I started spending more time at friends' houses, avoiding home whenever I could. Mum didn't seem to notice. She was too busy playing the perfect wife. But cracks started to show. Steve wasn't the man she thought he was. He was controlling, always criticizing her cooking, her clothes, even how she spoke to me. I overheard their arguments late at night, muffled through the floorboards above my head. One day, I came home from school to find Mum sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy. "Emma," she said quietly, "I made a mistake." She told me Steve had packed his things and left after a particularly nasty fight. She apologized for everything. For putting him first, for making me give up my space, for not listening. "Your room is still yours," she said. "I'll move your things back upstairs." It took time for us to rebuild our relationship. She promised to never put anyone else above me again, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had my home back. Not just my room, but my mum too. That experience taught both of us a lot about boundaries, priorities, and the importance of family. In the end, we were stronger for it. But I still can't walk past the basement door without shivering. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to settle. My mum seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She threw herself into redecorating my room with me, as if trying to make up for all the months I'd spent in the basement. "How about we paint the walls a new colour?" she asked one Saturday morning, holding up paint swatches. I looked at the options, surprised by how much she was trying. "Maybe a light blue?" "Light blue it is," she said with a smile. As we painted together, she opened up about her relationship with Steve. She admitted she had been so desperate to make things work with him that she ignored all the warning signs. "I thought having him here would make us a family," she said, her voice tinged with regret. But I realize now, we already were a family, just you and me. Her words meant more to me than I could say. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't invisible. Once my room was finished, it felt like home again, but better. It wasn't just a physical space, it was a symbol of our fresh start. My mum even started planning fun little traditions for us, like movie nights and cooking experiments. It was her way of showing that I was her priority now. But healing wasn't instant. There were still moments when I felt angry, remembering how easily she had pushed me aside. And there were times when she apologized again, as if she thought I hadn't forgiven her. One evening, as we were eating dinner, she put down her fork and said, "Emma, I know I've said it before, but I'm sorry. I just want to make sure you know how much you mean to me." I looked at her and realized how much she had grown too. "I know, Mum, and I forgive you. I really do." From that moment on, things started to feel normal again. Not the old normal, but a better one. In a way, Steve's arrival and departure were a blessing in disguise. It forced both of us to learn important lessons. For her, the importance of putting family first, and for me, the strength to stand up for myself. Now, every time I sit in my room, surrounded by light blue walls and the cozy comfort we worked so hard to create, I'm reminded of how far we've come. And I know that no matter what, we'll face the future together. A few months later, life felt completely different. My mum had started taking better care of herself, reading books she loved, going to yoga classes, and even picking up painting as a hobby. She seemed happier, more confident, and more like the mum I remembered from when I was a kid. As for me, I was finally able to focus on my senior year without the weight of tension hanging over me. I joined the school newspaper and spent my evenings writing articles in my newly restored room. My mum loved hearing about my stories, and we'd sit at the kitchen table talking about my plans for college. One day, while we were baking cookies, her latest hobby, she looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you, Emma. You've been so patient with me through everything. You've grown up into someone so strong." Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. I realized then that everything we went through wasn't just about her mistakes or Steve's behavior. It was about how we both grew through the experience. "Thanks, Mum," I said, smiling. "I'm proud of you too. You've come a long way." From that moment on, we weren't just mother and daughter. We were partners, navigating life together. It wasn't always perfect, and we still had our ups and downs, but our bond was stronger than ever. Eventually I went off to college, and my mum supported me every step of the way. She even sent care packages filled with my favourite snacks and little notes of encouragement. And every time I came home for the holidays, we'd fall right back into our new traditions: movie nights, cooking experiments, and long talks in the kitchen. Looking back, I realised that losing my room wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. In fact, it was the start of something better. A new chapter for both of us, built on understanding, forgiveness, and love. Years later, after I graduated college and started my first job, I came back home for a visit. The house felt smaller somehow, like it couldn't quite contain all the memories we'd made, or the growth we'd experienced since the Steve era, as we half-jokingly called it. When I walked into my old room, it was exactly how I'd left it. The light blue walls, the bookshelves lined with my favourite novels, and the soft, quilted bedspread my mum had picked out for me. It felt comforting, like stepping back into a part of myself that had been waiting there all along. At dinner that night, my mum shared some surprising news. "I've been thinking about selling the house," she said, her voice calm but a little hesitant. I nearly dropped my fork. "What? Why?" "I just feel like it's time for a fresh start," she explained. "This house has been good to us, but it also holds a lot of memories. Some of them aren't the best. I've been looking at smaller places closer to the city, something just for me. What do you think?" At first, the idea felt strange. This house had been our home for so long, and it was hard to imagine it belonging to someone else. But as I looked at her, I saw how at peace she seemed. She wasn't running away from anything this time. She was choosing to move forward. "I think that's a great idea," I said, smiling. "You deserve a place that's just yours." Over the next few months, we worked together to pack up the house. Every box we filled was a trip down memory lane. Photos from my childhood, holiday decorations we hadn't used in years, even the old paint swatches from when we redid my room. With each item, we laughed, cried, and reminisced about how far we'd come. When moving day arrived, it felt bittersweet. As we stood in the now empty house, my mum turned to me and said, "Emma, this place may have been our home, but you're my real home. You always will be." Her words stayed with me long after she moved into her cozy new apartment. And while the house was gone, the lessons we'd learned and the bond we'd built remained. It wasn't about where we lived. It was about how we chose to show up for each other, no matter what. In the end, the room I thought I'd lost all those years ago gave me something far more important, a stronger relationship with my mum, and the understanding that home isn't a place, it's the people you love. As the years passed, my mum and I stayed close, even as our lives continued to change. She flourished in her new apartment, transforming it into a vibrant and cozy space that truly reflected who she had become. It was filled with her paintings, books, and little pieces of our shared history. A framed photo of us laughing in the kitchen. The quilt from my old bed folded neatly on her sofa. I visited often, usually bringing stories about my career or the new city I had moved to. She always listened with excitement, her eyes lighting up as if my successes were her own. It felt good to know she was happy, independent and thriving in a way I hadn't seen in years. One summer, during one of my visits, she surprised me with something I didn't expect. "Emma," she said, handing me a small, wrapped box, "I've been saving this for you." Curious, I unwrapped it and found a beautiful leather-bound journal. When I opened it, I realized it wasn't empty. Every page was filled with her handwriting. "I started this after Steve left," she explained softly. "It's everything I learned, everything I wanted to tell you but didn't know how at the time. I thought maybe one day you'd want to read it." I flipped through the pages, overwhelmed by the depth of her reflections. She had written about her regrets, her hopes for me, and the things she wished she had done differently. But most of all, it was filled with love. Unapologetic, unconditional love. "Mum," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "This is the most incredible gift anyone has ever given me." We sat together for hours that evening, reading parts of the journal and talking about the past. It felt like we had come full circle, no longer mother and daughter navigating a rocky relationship, but two women who had grown together through every challenge. From that point on, the journal became a symbol of our journey, a reminder of how far we'd come and how much we'd learnt from each other. Years later, when I had children of my own, I found myself reading passages from the journal to remind me of what mattered most. My mum, now a doting grandmother, always laughed when she saw me with it. "I didn't realize it would become such a big deal," she said one day, watching me flip through its worn pages. "It's not just a journal, Mum," I replied. "It's our story, and it's everything I want to pass down to my kids." Her smile in that moment said everything. We had built something unshakable, something that would last far beyond the walls of any house or the pages of any book. It was the kind of love and connection that could weather anything, and I knew I'd carry it with me for the rest of my life.